Real property and personal property. My name is Nia Susanti. I am from Faculty of Law. My lecturer is Rudy Salam Sinulinga. The first, I want to explain about definition and difference. Most of business law deals with property. There are actually two different types of property, personal property and real property. This lesson explains the difference between these two types of property. And the next, property. There are two types of property. In legal terms, all property will be classified as either personal property or real property. Personal property is a movable property. It's anything that can be subject to ownership except land. And real property is immovable property. It's land and anything attached to the land. The next, personal property. Let's take a closer look at this. Why this is. It's helpful to note that personal property includes both tangible and intangible items. A tangible item is an item that can be felt or touched. For a business, tangible personal property includes items for the business owns such as: first, office furniture, business equipment, business vehicles, business goods. An intangible item is that the item that can be felt, cannot be felt, or touched. For a business intangible items, the business owns such as: first, stock, bonds, intellectual property, and money. And the next, the law on real property. Real property law covers many different topics related to land ownership and the use of the land. There are obligations and duties that come with ownership of real property. For instance, property owner must pay state and local property tax. If a property owner fails to pay tax, the property can be sold by the municipality to pay the tax owed. Property owners also must keep their property in reasonable, safe condition. The next, personal property. Personal property. Personal property is a class property that can include any asset that than real estate. Distinguishing a factor between personal property and real estate or real property. Example of tangible personal property include vehicles, furniture, goods, and collectibles. Personal property can also be intangible, as in the case of stock and bonds. And the next, understanding personal property. Personal property is also known as movable property, movables, and chattels. Because it is viewed as an asset, it may be taken into consideration by lender when someone applies for a mortgage or other loan. For example, if a refrigerator were destroyed in a house fire, a homeowner with a 10-year-old refrigerator and replacement coverage should receive enough money to buy new refrigerator, while a homeowner with actual cost average would receive whatever the insurance company determined a used 10-year-old refrigerator to be worth. In the event that their personal property is destroyed, policyholders must file a claim with their assurance company, describing what they lost. For the reason, homeowners are well advised to make an inventory of their personal property, ideally with photos and receipts, and store it safely off-premise just in case it's ever needed. The next thing you should remember about personal property and real property. Anything that can be legally owned can be called property. All property can be grouped into main categories: real property and personal property. Personal property can be further classified as chattels and intangibles. One reason to know these categories is simply to understand what other property lawyers are talking about. Of course, knowing the categories can also help you decide which rule should apply to a particular item of property and which remedies are available for violation of property rights. And the next, real property, land and building. Real property describes land and things that can attach to the land. Trees and other plants naturally growing on the land are also a part of the real property, but plants that require regular human cultivation and labor, such as grains and vegetables, sometimes aren't treated as a part of the real property. And the next, personal property. Personal property is all property that isn't real property. That's a big category. It can be further divided into two subgroups: chattels and intangibles. And the next, personal property, chattels. The term chattel sometimes refers to all kinds of personal property, but often it refers only tangible personal property, such as nose, foot, and toenail clipper, as opposed to intangible property. However, features may retain their quality as separate personal property for certain purposes. For example, at the end of the lease term, the tenant generally has the right to move fixture she installed, even though she doesn't have any more right to the real property when the lease ends. The next, personal property, intangibles. A person can own all sorts of intangible things, including the following: bank accounts, franchise and license, insurance policy, intellectual property such as patents and copyrights and trademarks, stock, bonds, promissory notes, and similar documents that aren't themselves valuable but merely represent intangible right. And the next, property rights. Things that can be owned. Some things can be owned at all, and therefore can be private property. Some of these things, such as light, air, and high seas, can be owned because they naturally seem communal. Other things, such as rivers and coastal water, can be owned because they belong to the public. And some things can be owned because they are illegal, like heroin. Thank you. This is my presentation. Thank you for your attention.